gets going here. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today on this kind of dreary and cold Monday for June, but for being here for our June Lunch and Learn. We are really excited because today will just be really conversational, as well as we've got some of our own Main Street executive directors sharing with us today. This is kind of a broad topic. We're talking a little bit about, we called it downtown real estate kind of 101, but really we're talking about a variety of different topics, from owning a building as a Main Street organization to doing historic preservation projects to working with code enforcement. So we're going to kind of hit a variety of topics today. That being said, please put questions in the chat. I know that the three that will be chatting with you all today would be willing to answer questions, or our team would. So feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. I will quickly kind of do introductions on our three speakers today. So our first is Kristen Johnson from historic downtown Kendallville, and then Jay Ellis from Jeffersonville Main Street, and then Beth Newton from Richmond Main Street. So we're really glad that all three of them were willing to hop on, because I think we reached out to each of them because they both have they all three have some experience in this area with different projects that I mentioned earlier. So so really excited about that. Beth, I might have you go first, since I know you kind of were able to share your screen earlier, if you want to go ahead and get set up.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see here. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep, we can see it.
Alrighty, let me get my other camera moved. All right, so I'm just going to touch on a couple highlight things. I only have about 10 slides, so I won't be taking too much time. But for Main Street Richmond, we have a couple properties that we actually own downtown. The first one is our Main Street Resource Center, and this is one that's been owned for several years. It's probably 20-ish, maybe more. So way before my time. But this property actually houses 18 office spaces, allows us to offer co-working space. Those tenants have a kitchenette, they can do mail delivery. A lot of our small businesses are just starting out, or even we've got right now some therapists and some attorneys and stuff where they really don't need a large space, but they still need that address to be able to send stuff to. So we do offer the mail delivery, the high-speed internet, 24/7 access to the tenants. And then our coworkers have a day access, so their fob will get them in like during normal work hours per se. And then we can offer 2 large conference or event rooms and some conference room space. So this is kind of our way to kind of get startup, whether it be I started working from home type thing, or especially now a lot of remote workers. We've done the Make Your Move in Richmond or Wayne County, so that's been a big push. So we're able to offer co-working space and office space for those individuals. So these are just some pictures of this space. As you can see, the conference room space with that, there's a large screen and projector, there's a sound system, it can be catered, and we can fit large groups. This actually, there's 2 different sides, so we can split it down the middle and do 2 different ones, or have it all opened up and do one space. And then in our office spaces, we do offer those completely furnished. And then if they want to bring their own stuff in, they can. We allow them to paint, to take care of the space, kind of make it their own. But our offices range anywhere from like 76 square foot, which is just a normal little small office, to 252 square foot, where they can fit a couple office or a couple of desks in there, or if they have a smaller group or they need a workspace. And then we have our second building, which we just purchased last year. This is our Main Street office space. This building is actually, or this picture is an older picture of the building. So the left side is where the offices are if you're looking at this picture, and then the right side is an income producing side. So that right side is a restaurant space that offers a kitchen, the dining room, has a front prep area, dry storage space, and then actually an office space for the individuals that would run that restaurant. And then one of the reasons that we were really interested in this building is it has a second and third floor that we can offer some upstairs housing. So right now we're looking at potentially 1 to 2 bedroom apartments, and then 1 2 to 3 bedroom on the third floor. So that's our newest purchase. And as you can tell, this building with the Stellar grants a few years back, I think 2017-ish, they were able to redo the facade on this. So it's one of the nicer facades in the area. This is inside the restaurant space, and actually we just hosted my son's graduation party in here this weekend because the restaurant we had in there has relocated. So we took the opportunity to go in and kind of update the space. It really hadn't been painted or anything for a while. So we've been putting some new wall paneling up, changing out the lights, giving it some fresh paint, just doing some cleanup. But it's a great space to have a restaurant. So once we get the cleanup and the rehab done, then we'll be leasing that space back out as well. And the apartments, we're hoping to potentially get started towards the end of the year. We're still working with some local design firms to try to get some plans for that. So just some of the pros from our side of building ownership, obviously having the local ownership, not having someone out of town or the absentee owner, showing the community that as a Main Street, we're willing to invest financially downtown. Some prior board members prior to my time weren't really sure if a Main Street should own a building or if they should just rent space. For me, I kind of feel like we need to put our money where our mouth is. If we're supporting other people coming into town and buying properties, why would we not want to show them that we're willing to do the same? And then this allows us to control the occupants, whether it be the restaurant space or the office space. We have some kind of control over what's going in there. And then it also provides us with an income stream, which we all know as Main Street organizations, whether we're doing events or trying to get sponsorships and funding, it's hard. I mean, it's really not the easiest thing to do. So this does allow us to, rent the office space and get some income when the restaurant comes in, to get some income. And then as well, when we get the apartments done, it'll give us a solid income stream as well. Some of the cons that we've run into for building ownership, obviously maintenance, the expense related. One of our air units went down last week, and when I called to have them come fix it, they said, did it smell funny? Because it was on fire. So you never know what you're going to get. But so the expense related to that, just handling the maintenance. If you don't have somebody on staff that really is over your building, a great resource is to have that committee within your board that is in charge of the building and the properties. And if you have properties overseeing, whether it be, how much rent are we charging, but also who's handling the maintenance, getting that taken care of. And then in general, just being a landlord. I mean, if you have any kind of rental properties, sometimes it's just some tenants are needy and some of them aren't. I mean, it's just, you never know what you're going to get up. And then the upfront expense to purchase the property. Obviously, if you're going to have to take out a mortgage, is that something that you can budget for? Or if you have the funds, is that something you want to spend that lump sum on initially? And then a couple of things, where to start. Really, what is your short-term goal? Are you wanting to just save the property from being with an out-of-town owner? Are you wanting to keep it locally? Are you wanting to save it because somebody else wants to buy it and tear it down? What's your short-term goal? And then what's your end goal? Do you want it to be an income producing property? Do you just want to save it and then find somebody that's a better fit and then sell it later? You need to determine kind of where you're going with that. And then does the property have historic designation? Based on what your short-term and long-term goals are you going to restore the property? If it is historic, are you willing to do it within the Secretary of Interior standard guidelines? If so, where does the rehabilitation tax credits, where do they fall in with this? As a nonprofit, you're not going to get those tax credits. So you can always do the for-profit subsidiary, but there are other options too, whether it be you work with an investor who can take those tax credits and use those within your process of restoring. So there's a lot you need to determine kind of where you go, so what your end goal is and how you want to purchase that or how you want to hold ownership. Just some ideas to think about when you're starting out. And then one of the other areas that we started doing, I guess it's probably been 2 years now, to try to combat just some of the blight, people not maintaining the property, or even more recently, we've had a lot of issues with security and break-ins, and we've got a lot of construction happening downtown. So with construction means not as much traffic. Without as much traffic, it's a great place to come down and hang out when you shouldn't be. So we've seen that quite a bit. So we started a PALS program, and it's for any of the businesses within our district. And it's as simple as a one-page application. And for that, and then they also have a participation agreement that basically says you'll maintain the cameras we give you. We'll give them 3 cameras, a security light, and then up to $350 for cleanup, improvement, paint, whatever they need just to help to look more appealing, a curbside appeal. So they're going to agree that they'll maintain what we give them for a minimum of 3 years, that they'll turn over any images to law enforcement if needed, which has really been helpful. We actually had one break-in last week that from the cameras that we had just given them 2 weeks prior, they were able to get a really good picture and take that to the police. So that they'll maintain that, and then they just have to agree that they'll keep the Wi-Fi as well. So it's a very simple program. We've gotten this funded through, we put in money, our local UEA put in money, and then our local foundation put in money as well to get that going. And this is an example of one of the properties. This is actually between our 2 buildings that we went in and just put up. It was really just an alleyway, but it was a place where we had a lot of, we do obviously deal with homeless as well, but they would hang out down here at night because it was kind of out of the way. But we were able to go in, put some lights up, just do a little fence. And then our local Richmond Power and Light donated the 2 spools, and we turned those into tables. And then we also did 3 bench/tables. So the whole thing was right around $400, but it made a huge difference in appearance and just made it feel safer too. Okay, so that is all I had for my quick overview.
Yeah, thank you. So Beth, the only one question that came to mind for me was, I don't know about the co-working space. I don't know if that one was just kind of given to you all, or kind of how did you end up kind of being able to get those 2 buildings? Like, was it kind of a goal of yours, or did you kind of go through the financial process of taking out money to get them? Like, how did that all work for you? Was it through partnerships or?
In the beginning, before my time, we actually owned a smaller building that just had the Main Street offices, and then upstairs was just storage. When our resource center became available, we actually worked with redevelopment and got funds from them to redo the building. So it was a partnership at that point with Redevelopment Commission. And then for the portion that we had to put in, we did take out a mortgage, which we were able to pay off last year. So that felt nice. So when we paid that off is when we bought the new building. And the new building was right next to our existing building, and the individuals were retiring, and we were fearful that it was going to go into the hands of somebody out of town. So that was something that I really pushed forward just to try to keep that local and to try to help us build another income stream. And the upper story housing is something that we really wanted. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I know it's always helpful for others to hear kind of how that comes about, because I know it's a process, but thank you for sharing. If anyone has questions for Beth, feel free to throw it in the chat. We'll go ahead and move to Kristen, but again, if you have questions, we'll come back at the end if you have questions for any of them. So Kristen, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you if you want to share your screen and talk a little bit about your presentation.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you guys see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So again, I'm Kristen Johnson. I'm with the Historic Downtown Kendallville. And Abby asked me to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've done to overcome blight. Obviously, it's an ongoing issue. We're never going to, solve all of it, but we have had a lot of success in the last several years. So just wanted to go through that a little bit. So 2019 is the year that I became the ED for Main Street. At the same time, I became the ED for the Chamber of Commerce downtown. So when I got the chamber job, I got both. One was my paid position and one was my volunteer. Here, you got to do this too. And at the time, we had a really excessive blight, rundown buildings. There was no enforcement, and there was a general attitude like, you can't tell me what to do with my building and my property downtown. So we had very high vacancy rates. And at one point, we actually had, I want to say, 3 churches and 3 thrift shops downtown, because everybody knew that you could get a downtown building for next to nothing, whether it's cheap rent or just even buying a building. So the building you see here was an old gun shop, and it was hit by a storm in August of 2019. And it stayed that way for about 3 years. Tore down their awning, took off their shingles, and it was the worst looking building downtown. And the guy that owned it didn't care. So there was also a very low perception of downtown. And these may not be verbatim, but this is pretty close to the types of things that we would see on Facebook or social media on a regular basis. Downtown Kendallville's dead. I can't wait to move out at Kendalltucky. And anytime the city tried to do anything towards improvement, it was considered a waste of money, a waste of tax dollars. Why would we want to do that for, such a devoid space? So it wasn't looking good. We knew we needed a strategy, and my board spent a lot of time talking about it and coming up with different ideas, like what can we do? And the problem really boiled down to, we didn't have any teeth to enforce anything. We didn't, we could tell people what we wanted them to do, but they didn't have to do it because we're just the Main Street organization. So one of the things we talked about was putting a letter together to send to the property owners, whether they're absentee or they just have a blighted building, that talks about like how their building is negatively affecting other businesses downtown, talking about, hey, maybe you're in a bind. Would you like to sell your building? If so, let us help. And then also, like, let us share with you some of the resources that are out there, whether it's tax abatements or facade grants or other types of incentives that are available. And so we actually put the letter together. We had our list out. We knew who we were sending it to. But as I said earlier, I was not only the Main Street director, I was the chamber director. My chamber got wind of it and said, absolutely not. You cannot send that letter. You're going to, make enemies of our members, et cetera, et cetera. They were worried about the backlash. So that kind of died. So we're at the point now where, like, really frustrated because we didn't know what to do. We did a survey because we were like, I wonder, what the attitude is in town and, around the community. So we did a survey, and we included community members, property owners, and even just merchants that like rented buildings downtown, and just asked them, what do you see are some of the biggest problems with downtown Kendallville? And we gave them like a list of 25 or 30 things that they could actually score. So we could see, what those top issues are. And the top 3, it was really interesting. The top 3 were that the buildings downtown are neglected, need rehabilitated, that there's not enough interesting or attractive businesses, and that there were too many vacant storefronts. And so we were like, well, that sucks, but it also tells a really good story. So the next thing we did was we scheduled a meeting with the city and shared those survey results. And we also shared with them the addresses that we'd already kind of put together of all those buildings that were sort of, in the worst condition. along with a list of what was wrong with them, along with photos, if they had broken windows or rotting wood or whatever. We put that all together in a report, and then we asked them and or begged them to consider code restrictions. And the picture you see here is the old Paul's Pub building. My husband actually took that picture with his drone. If you can see the hole in the roof, that also happened in August of 2019 when the storms came through. And it was that way until at least the end of 2022. So basically it was raining in that building for years. And the building owner, who lives in the county but not local, didn't care. Nobody was forcing him to do anything. And so, we're looking at this, what used to be a really neat restaurant that had been closed for a while, just going downhill. And not only was it affecting that building, but it was also causing leaks next door. And it was really kind of snowballing. So the meeting that we had with the city was, we had the mayor there, we had the chief of police there, and then we also had the city attorney there. And I will say that the mayor and the police chief were really very interested in getting involved and addressing the issues. They were like, yes, we see the problem. We've got to do something. I mean, they were already aware. The city attorney, however, was very hesitant to do anything that would cause any kind of a backlash. Older gentleman, not a big risk taker, and he was a little worried about where this could go. But, we gave him the information that we had, and then we waited. And I'm telling you, it felt like I aged 20 years waiting for a response. And I followed up and I followed up. And as it turns out, we already had really strong code enforcement laws written about blight. They'd been written in 1991, but nobody was enforcing them. So, the group agreed that they were going to kind of beef those up, bring them up to date because they're 20 years old, which is what they did. But the other thing they learned about this, and my door's shut, I have to say this quietly, we also learned that the code enforcement officer at the time had never written a citation, like never written any citations. So obviously there was a bigger problem. So fast forward a little bit to 2021. That specific city attorney retired, the one that was hesitant to do anything that might ruffle feathers. New attorney came in, very on board with things. The city hired a code enforcement officer specifically it says dedicated to downtown, maybe not dedicated, but they're highly focused on downtown and the blight. And then around the same time, we got a new streetscape grant through Okra. At the time, downtown was looking so drab that most of the feedback was like, what a waste of tax dollars. Why would you put any money in this downtown? I mean, it was like very much perceived as like a joke. But I will say this, those three things at the top of the list, and that's why they're in blue, were like the catalyst for the change that came after that. We came in top 5 for Preserving Main Street grant, which was exciting. And as a result of the new streetscape and the Preserving Main Street possibilities, we had some new businesses move to downtown, just kind of in anticipation, and they renovated. They made the effort, the 2 or 3 businesses that came to update their buildings. Then the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council decided that their project for the year was going to be an alley activation project. And so they took a rundown alley next to our theater, and they raised all the money. They raised about $30,000. They put in all new seating, chairs, tables, including handicap accessible, murals, lighting, and they made this, and they repaved it. I mean, they made this really junky space look really nice. And so then as a Main Street, I started applying for grants. We install some murals downtown. We do some painted electrical boxes, just these little bitty things, but that lighten things up. And we had applied, which I guess probably every Main Street in the country probably did, but we had applied for that hometown makeover grant that came about in 2020, and we didn't get it. But we had submitted video and all that. Well, they called us in 2021 and they're like, I know you didn't get the grant, you didn't win, but we remember you. And we were just wondering if you've had any changes since then. Have you updated? Have you, whatever. And so we did another video and we started showing them things like the alley and the murals and the businesses that have renovated and things like that. And they actually featured us. Couldn't believe it. They featured us on Thanksgiving weekend. It was like so unexpected, but it was a really nice surprise. So at this point, like attitudes are changing. Property owners are like starting to change their mind about, in the community in general is changing their mind about downtown. But the downtown specifically are starting to see what could be, and they're getting really fed up with the blight that's there. And it's now really, really obvious, like which buildings are the ones that are negligent, because they're standing out. So several property owners did start investing in their properties because we do have a pretty healthy facade grant program. The code enforcement officer that was hired really started to send letters to property owners, here you go, you have 60 days. You have 60 days to fix this issue. And if you don't, you're going to get fined $2,500 every, however, 2 weeks or month or whatever. There's our teeth. Like we have teeth now. And then of course, Kendallville was awarded the Preserving Main Street grant, and that brought so much excitement to our community. And it also drew a lot of, interest from additional business owners. So now we've got this momentum going. As part of Preserving Main Street's grant, we established a historic preservation district, a commission, and guidelines. So not only do we have code enforcement teeth with the city, but we now have our own teeth. So, if somebody wants to put new windows in, they no longer can put in the old mobile home style windows, which we do have a building downtown that has mobile home windows. I cannot believe it, but we do. Can no longer put in, things that don't fit the historic character integrity of the building. So we're not like trying to like crack a whip and say, you can't do this and you can't do that. But we are saying you got to follow some guidelines and keep that historic integrity for your building. And it's actually been very positively received by the community. Also, we last year we completed a humanities project where we highlighted over 25 of the people in the buildings from downtown that contribute to our history. So there's a couple of samples that you can see here. These are actually giant window clings that are displayed all over downtown. And I think we have about 21 individuals highlighted. And then there are several buildings, like some of the first buildings and some significant buildings that have historical plaques on them that talk about why it's so important to Kendallville. And we promoted that. I still see people walking up and down Main Street reading those, and I get a lot of positive feedback about that as well. I learned a lot actually about Kendallville, and my family's from here, but I learned a lot about Kendallville through the project. So from there, obviously absentee building owners started finally, they are complying now and completing their renovations. We've got more retailers coming, the property values are going up. Parking becomes an issue, and I know every Main Street says parking's an issue. I hear that at every conference I go to. But we really do have parking issues now. Like you can't park downtown at lunchtime. There's nowhere to park unless you're behind the buildings, and we love it because there was a time when there was, you could park anywhere you wanted. And so the fact that it's full is great. The fact that we have people hustling, bustling up and down our streets, we love it. And then our redevelopment commission, in addition, we have this Preserving Main Street grant, which is $2 million towards your facades downtown. That sounds like a lot of money, but it only goes so far. So we went to the redevelopment commission and said, can you help us stretch this? So they set aside an additional $300,000 in facade funding for property owners who didn't make the cut of those top 10 buildings or whatever. So we have several building owners that are taking advantage of that. It's a 25-75 match. So they can get up to $50,000 to renovate, update their facades. And they can do that until the $300,000 is gone. So we're hoping to have that all expended by the end of next year. one thing that was really neat, the building that you see here on the left, that was an old rundown gas station. The owner was out of the country, and he was a pretty sneaky guy. Like every time we tried to take him to court, he'd change ownership with his brother or his cousin or his uncle. But we finally ended up getting him to court to get that building torn down, and it became the property of the city. And after that, our local Rotary Club adopted that and raised over $250,000 from local donors to create this beautiful pocket park that we now have. It's adjacent from City Hall, and we have concerts there. We do our Christmas tree lighting. It's really kind of been a unique asset for our community. So our downtown, the results from all of this, our downtown has gone from over 20% vacancy to 14%. Obviously, we want to keep working that number down. We've attracted multiple businesses, but also investors to Kendallville. We've had several come through and look at buildings for the possibility of second floor housing opportunities, because we have a big old hotel and some other buildings, a lot of empty upstairs space that could be used. And we have an investor actually. And so I'm very interested, Beth, to hear more about your project, because we have an investor coming in who wants to put, a co-working incubator space in an old gas station garage downtown. And we're actually going to the RDC on Wednesday to ask them to pay for it. So that'll be an interesting conversation. Coming up next, one of the surveys that we did, what do people want to see downtown? They want fine dining, and they want a brewery or someplace to go get a steak and a drink. We don't have anything like that downtown, and we need it. Just in a few weeks, we'll be installing some unique metal art sculptures in that new pocket park. Again, all that money was raised locally. We're going to, any day now, start working on the Preserving Main Street facade work. There's 3 buildings have been approved with contractors, and so that should be starting any day. And then we're going to be focusing on a transformational strategy, which is family friendly. I did want to share with you from the beginning that building I showed you, that's just one of the transformations that has happened. That's the old gun shop. The guy, it sat there like that for 3 years. He didn't want to do anything. We had a new couple come in, they purchased it, all new windows upstairs, downstairs, new crowns on the windows, just really beautiful. And when that opens later this fall, that will be a massage and spa, health and wellness center. So we're really excited about that. So that's kind of, it was a whole lot of things that kind of snowballed that got us to where we are today. But I just kind of wanted to share with you, it was the littlest things that got us started, and then it just all went from there. So that's all I got. So let me know if you have questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, that was great. One of the things I love about how you all approached that was the fact that, you went for it and you did the code enforcement, which I think is the hardest part for people. At least when we're out talking to people, there's a lot of, I know, and understandably nervousness about what is that backlash going to be like? How do we really go about enforcing this? So I think your example is a really strong example of how you did it and you did see the results positively. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't, I'm sure, some pushback at some points, but yeah, I really appreciate you kind of sharing that journey, because it also didn't happen overnight and it took time and a lot of conversations. And so I think that's also a good thing to take note of.
One thing I will mention, the Preserving Main Street grant, the Streetscape grant, the code enforcement, every little thing that we did, we got pushback. You can't do that. It's never going to happen. And I just didn't want to hear it. So I know that as a Main Street manager, you hear that crap all the time. Don't listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you think it can work, do your best to make it work.
Yep. I love it. So good. Well, thank you. And yes, as Kristen said, throw your questions in the chat if you have any. Jay, I think you have your screen shared, so you can get started whenever you're ready.
All right, can you see my screen, Abby?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. So I want to start off with what we call, is that picture large enough? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
think it looks good to me. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have, I'm going to talk about like the Pearl Street Infill Revitalization Project. So Jeffersonville Main Street, we own several properties downtown, and part of the reason is because of this project. And like a lot of towns all across America, we've had tear downs, and we took urban renewal money back in the 60s to try and fix what was ailing downtown. And hindsight's 2020. It turned out it actually hurt downtown more than it helped it. So we had empty lots, and so we were trying to find a way to rebuild part of our streetscape, and part of it is it's tied to these bridges. So the bridge in nearest to you is that's the Big Four pedestrian bridge. Now, it was built in 1895 as a railroad bridge, and back in the late 70s, early 80s, they discontinued that use, and so they just cut off both ends of the access to the bridge, and so it was just known as the Bridge to Nowhere. And so the waterfront development people in Louisville, Kentucky, our neighbor to the south, had come up with a plan to convert it to a pedestrian bridge, and so they needed a place for it to land in Jeffersonville. So the city of Jeffersonville wanted to create a park that would be a really attractive landing spot for all these walkers and bikers to come over to Jeffersonville. So that bridge extends across the river now, and then it does follow the path of partly of the old railroad bridge, and then it makes a nice terminus right in downtown Jeffersonville. And it's been wonderful. That bridge has been a real shot in the arm. There's over 1 million people a year bike and walk across that bridge. So it's just been a wonderful investment in the community. So let me back up here. So in order to build this park, the city needed to tear down or move several homes. And so we had homes that were located on Market Street and on Pearl Street here in our project area. And so these were the homes, and they were fine contributing homes in our National Register district, but we didn't want to see them torn down. So we had, through a special grant, there's another bridges project. They wanted to put an interstate bridge, 2 interstate bridges through Jeffersonville. And to do that, since they were coming into our National Register district, it triggered Section 106 review. And that means any federal money that's going to be spent on a project has to have some review and possibly mitigation for impacts on historic properties. And so we had come to an arrangement where we would get some grant money that would be managed by the DHPA in Indiana, Historic Preservation and Archaeology. And we were able to, there's another overhead view of our project area. So we were able to get this lot. And this was, it's 1 block off of our main drag, which, our main street is Spring Street in Jeffersonville. And so this is 1 block over, it's on Pearl Street, very visible corner. And it was for years home to what you see there, which was a parking lot. And it was very rarely ever used. It had a chain link fence around it, and it was locked all the time. A bank had owned it, and they didn't see a need for it. And so it had weeds in it, fence around it, scrub trees and bushes all around it. So we zeroed in on this. We said, this is a great opportunity to rebuild the streetscape. And so through the grant dollars, we were able to acquire this lot. It took us 1 year from the time I called the property owner, who was out of town in Chicago. Our attorney kept saying, we're never going to get that lot. It's just too tangled, too messy, too complicated. We'll never get it. And I said, this is the spot. We've got to be tenacious. And we stuck with it. And then, like I said, from almost 1 year to the day from the initial conversation, it was when we signed the closing papers and got this lot. And so the houses that were going to be torn down, we went to the city and said, hey, we've got these grant dollars. We're working with the state of Indiana. We're working with Indiana Landmarks. We're working with local architects and engineers. and we've got this plan. And so they said, okay, if we like your plan, take the homes. We're not going to tear them down. So you guys take them and move them. And so here they are being prepped for move. And here's some of the other homes that were slated for demolition. And then we using Indiana Landmarks experience, because they moved a lot of houses and saved a lot of houses throughout Indiana. We got connected with some moving companies, and we actually just, people still say, I can't believe you just pick up houses and move them. So we put them on some flatbeds, and we actually had to go under. The Big 4 bridge was already well under construction at that point. So we had to go under the ramp, and we had to shave off a little bit of the roofs of the houses to make that clearance. Sometimes the moving companies have said they've had to deflate their tires a little bit just to get that extra inch or two they need to make the clearances. And here's one of the other homes being moved down Pearl Street. So we set the homes at their new site in the 400 block of Pearl Street. And like I said, to rebuild that streetscape. And the first thing, you're kind of seeing the beautified picture of them, but when we first set them down, they look like those photos of where they sat, and they were not super pretty, aesthetically pleasing. And we had a lot of people, sort of like some of the other panel participants, that said, gosh, what a waste of money. Why did you guys move those? And so we got our committee together and just talked about, okay, we've got a little bit of an image problem, and we're going to put the cart before the horse. And so we painted them. And just that wasn't we had a long construction sequence and plan that we had gone over with the general contractor and the architect, but we just said we've got to make these, show people the vision of rebuilding the streetscape. So we painted them before they were completely renovated inside, and it was amazing. So from that moment on, we got compliments all the time, people saying, wow, those buildings look amazing. Can't believe you guys did that. What a great investment. So that was a critical piece there, just to get more community buy-in. And then we did these structures were not in their best shape. They did have people living in them prior to the move, but they had seen, they needed TLC, had not seen a lot of updates. So we took them all down to the studs. So it was a major renovation for all the properties. And then here's a picture. This is one of them. This is 405 Pearl Street. It's one of the houses we moved. We had put out RFP to see if there were businesses that were interested in locating, and immediately we got a lot of responses. And one of the responses was the gentleman and his wife who had an idea for this coffee shop, and they said that they wanted to do game and coffee. They gave us a great proposal, and so they were our first tenant in there, and they're still our only tenant in that building. It's a very popular spot, sees a lot of traffic. So that was a startup business. It didn't exist before this project. And Jeffersonville Main Street owns the building, and they're a tenant. And they've had such success that they actually last year had added on. They asked us permission, and we worked out a financial arrangement where they could add on to the building in a sensitive manner. So you can see they tried to match the shingles on the original structure, and so they've got a lot more interior space, and then they've got this deck space as well. So that's been a real success story. And one of the other buildings we own, this, again, we put an RFP out to see if there was interest, and Pearl Street Tap House had come to us. It was a couple again, and they had this idea for a business. They had always wanted to open a restaurant and pub, and so had a great plan. We work with them on some of the interior renovations, and it's been, again, another successful startup business, and it's helped rebuild the streetscape and brought a lot of people downtown. And then this was sort of our finished product. So if you remember the first slide, we had gone from this parking lot, unused, ugly, no vibrancy at all, to rebuilding this section of downtown and adding a lot of vibrancy to it. And because of this investment, the city had come along and said, yes, we're going to do some streetscape elements. And so they put in new street lights with street signs and had redone the sidewalks. So just the partnership between Jeffersonville Main Street, the city of Jeffersonville, the state of Indiana, Indiana Landmarks, was just critical to making all this happen. And now it's a place where we use it as a headquarters for a lot of our events. I guess I failed to mention that this blue building here on the corner is the home to Jeffersonville Main Street. It's our office after being in the old Carnegie Library for years, and then being in the attic of a historic building for years with not great heat or air. We've finally got this permanent home. And again, this is what we started with, and it was a long, arduous process. And just through partnerships and grants and working with all of these different entities, we were able to turn something that just wasn't contributing, didn't look great, into something really positive. And this is where we are today. And we've had a $30 million investment behind these properties now, with an apartment. They're upper income apartments. It's a 4-story building, and it's people that live there that have disposable income, who can spend money at the restaurants and the coffee shops and that sort of thing. So we're very proud of this achievement. I will say that I think that it's critical that that if you are able to survey your historic district, and if possible, if you have enough contributing buildings, I would say that it's very important to have a historic district and a National Register district if you can. The only reason, or one of the main reasons, that these buildings were saved and this project was able to happen, is because we had the National Register district. And then when the Section 106 review process kicked in, these properties were eligible for renovation. And, and I think that Beth had mentioned, property ownership. It's a great, great asset for a Main Street program. It gives you that revenue stream. It gives you stability, but it does come with maintenance. I mean, maintenance is an ongoing investment that we have to make in these properties. It's well worth it for the life of the buildings and for the good of the organization. But it's been so beneficial, and a lot of different parties involved, and everybody's been very pleased with the outcome. And Abby, that's my presentation, and I could talk on this all day if you wanted.
Thanks, Jay. No, I appreciate that. I again, just another really cool story about, and I love how you emphasized just the importance of those partnerships, because again, I know some of you might be hearing some of these things and you're like, I don't know how we would ever get that accomplished, how we would get there. And I really do think the key to it is working with those different entities, and really, sometimes it's just baby steps too, and starting conversations. And so again, if a goal of yours is to help revitalize, save some historic buildings, maybe it's just at first getting connected with landmarks, and so on. So really just trying to build, and then eventually maybe doing something as big as owning your own building or rehabbing a historic building with the help of some of these other, again, organizations who can provide you resources. So, so yeah, thanks. No, thanks, Jay. That was great. Does anyone have any questions for any three of our presenters? They all shared a lot of good information, so I want to make sure that we use these last few minutes to let them answer questions. Check in the chat just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay.
And Abby,
yeah,
I will say, I think all these projects just reinforce the whole idea that, historic preservation is important in and of itself, but it does prove that it's economic development. Yep. And, I think that that's something that needs to be reinforced and reminded to our city officials. And, like you said, partnerships are key.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, feel free, we're recording this presentation, so feel free, share this with your municipality, share them these stories that other communities are doing this. They're enforcing code, they're, rehabbing these historic buildings or helping at least be a partner in that, because again, I know sometimes it's kind of getting people to see that that even is a possibility and that it actually has that long-term economic impact. So, yes, that's a very good point. So Barbara asked, how do you deal with a city administration that believes that demolition is the answer to economic development? Do either of you three have any experience dealing with an administration that is more pro demolishing buildings than saving them?
Well, we've had our share of tear downs. I mean, over the decades, I'd say the current administration usually only does a tear down if there's some imminent threat. But I mean, yeah, in the past we'd seen a lot of demolitions, because I think that's from a city government perspective. I think it's just easy. It eliminates the problem. And preservation can be challenging and complex, and that's not always the route that people want to go. I would just say advocate, get a group together and sit down with the mayor or the city council of that district, and it's going to be incremental progress. Probably you're not going to change hearts and minds overnight, but if you can just show them success stories and show them the commitment. I mean, there's no easy answer to that, but if they think tear downs are the answer, that's unfortunate, but it's an educational process, and just show them, the proof in the pudding.
Hey, it's Kristen. I don't think anybody from our city has ever felt that way, but I have heard people in the community say that before, that, why don't they just tear them down? Why are they spending all this money? And I think that it really helped to have somebody from Indiana Landmarks come and say, your downtown is really historically intact. And, there's a lot of downtowns that don't have that anymore. They have teeth, or they have, everything's covered up, or all the beauty and the ornate pieces have been removed. And so it's like people that are local, they don't see it and appreciate it until somebody tells them how good it is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think with that, Barbara, I think Jay just said it. It is incremental. Like, I do think sometimes you might really, really work hard with, maybe again, you get that group together, you try to save a building and they still tear it down, which is super unfortunate, and you don't want that to happen. But if it leads to at least a conversation with somebody and you're able to educate someone on the importance of historic preservation and how it is an economic driver, again, that's something that, especially with those city officials or other organizations, really helping them see this does actually bring in money, then that's really, if that's the first step you can take, then maybe the next building won't come down, because you can start the conversation there. So yeah, I'm seeing your message.
And I think getting developers, if you have some developers who are preservationists, if you get them on board and get them to call city officials and tell them, hey, we want to invest in these have character and charm, and they're part of the fabric of what makes the town authentic. I think that's a huge ally to have.
Yeah, and that's good, Barbara, that you already are working with Indiana Landmarks, even if they're still not listening. Again, just trusting that hopefully, even if it's not this administration, you just keep going at it. I saw Abby Huff also shared a resource as well. So yeah. Any other questions or thoughts, comments on what we heard today? And Jay, Kristen, and Beth, if you guys are okay with it, I'll probably share some of your contact information with people. Oh yeah, go ahead, Abby. Maybe I thought I saw Abby's hand was up. Maybe I'm wrong.
And we'll give her this message.
I don't know if maybe it's my computer. I don't know. I'm not hearing for some reason, but anyway, but yeah, any other questions? Oh, as I was saying, I will send out their contact information if they're okay with it, just in case as you all are processing this or thinking about it, if there's a question or you want to get some more one-on-one advice. All three of them are amazing resources. But we still have a couple minutes, so I just want to make sure no one else has any questions or things that they would like to ask. Oh, Abby just said in the chat, sometimes with the city, you need to talk in numbers. Yes, for sure. Being able to kind of speak their language and see, again, help them see some of that investment. Barbara, definitely reach out, you know, reach out to us too if we can help provide any more resources. Yeah, so if the building's lost, what does that ultimately remove from your tax base? And how can that impact your community in a negative way? And again, really reframing it under that economic development lens, because sometimes people just aren't, it's not going to just be the fact that it's an older, an old historic building, even though that should matter, it doesn't matter to a lot of people. And so, helping again, kind of transfer it into that language of this is economic development and here's how it's going to negatively impact that if this building comes down. Anything else?
And Abby, this is Jay. We've, in the past, we had done speaker series too, that you can get some small grants for that. And like we brought in, Don Ripkema, and he talked about, just the value of buildings. And we brought in just, Pulitzer Prize winners, and we brought in governors from different states just to talk about downtown revitalization and smart growth and that sort of thing. So, and, hopefully that, you just keep chipping away and that message gets through.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. Yeah, totally agree. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. But that being said, as always, I will make sure to put this recording up on the YouTube channel. And Jay, Beth, and Kristen, thank you so much for being on today. It's helpful sometimes to hear just again about the journey, the process. And I know that looks different for every community, but just appreciate you all sharing some of the ups and downs of that and of kind of downtown real estate and dealing with downtown buildings. So yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for taking time today, and we will see you soon. Thanks everyone.